Welcome to Afrospectrum. Today, we dive into the controversial world of stolen African art and the European claim of ownership. A claim that's not only false, but deeply unfair.
Well, we're joined by art historian Didier Rickner, the managing editor of La Tribune de l'Art, the Tribune of Art. Thank you for being with us. That art collector, these artifacts, who do they belong to?
They belong to the museums where they are now, because there are laws, And if even for the artifacts which were looted in the 19th century, the war, there was laws, and the looting of war was legal. Maybe it's not moral, but it's legal. And if you want to come back on this, why don't you come back 19th century, 17th century, 16th century? You cannot stop. You don't know where to stop.
At the time, they weren't independent countries.
Yes.
So, of course, the colonial power can decide to take stuff. I mean, it is looting, isn't it?
No. It is looting, yes. Part of it was looting. But if you have read the report, I did read the report in English because I didn't get the French version. And the report says it's not only the war looting which must be returned, but everything. The scientific expeditions where they collected artifacts, they must give it back. The gifts from the colonial administration, you must give it back. Actually, you are going to give back to some countries, and they are not reclaiming it because it's only the Benin which reclaim the artifacts, not the other ones.
Only Benin is claiming it.
Yes.
And that raises the other question, which is a delicate one. You heard in that report,
yes,
the Beninois scholar there,
yes,
Ms. Zanzou,
yes, I know
saying, how do we get African kids to see their own artifacts?
Yes, you can do this. I think I milite for cooperation between French museums and Africa to organize exhibitions of art, African art. You can organize exhibitions permanently.
And how does that go? Because there's the question of
yes,
the pieces when they travel around Africa. Does it go okay?
Yes, it's okay to send them to Africa, but they must return to the French museums where they belong.
So why is there this promise from Emmanuel Macron?
I don't know. You must ask him. But I think he was like a witch who doesn't know what he does, But because he says we are going to give it back, as if these artifacts doesn't belong to anyone but the French museums. And it's very interesting because we saw an example in Senegal, I think it was a museum in Senegal. In Senegal, you have a museum, IFAN Museum, which has in its collections many works of art from many other countries from Africa, and it was a collection built during the colonial era. Are they going to give it back to the other countries, this museum in Senegal? I don't think so.
Many people watching this, maybe they don't know Africa very well, but they do know the Elgin marbles
yes,
that Greece has been asking from Britain
yes,
since the last century. So what's the difference between Greece asking for its artifacts back and what's going on in Africa?
I do not see any difference. The report says it's not the same. The report says it's only about sub-Saharan Africa, because they say 90% of art is outside. This number, I don't know where it comes from, and even in the report they say they don't know where it comes from. But even if it's true, we must help African countries to exhibit works of art. We must lend them to Africa. So there is no difference between Elgin marbles and this. There is no difference with anything. So all the artifacts which were taken in Greece must be returned, in Egypt must be returned, in Algeria must be returned. It's the beginning of something you don't know where it's going to go.
But if they were stolen...
No, they were not stolen. It was looting, yes, but there were law.
I don't get this distinction between looting and stealing.
No, it was stolen if you want, but in the 19th century, in the 18th century, in 17th century, during all the wars, art was stolen. So we must give back everything or nothing. And more of this, these works of art, when they were taken. If they were not taken, they would have disappeared because many of artifacts, African artifacts, are made of wood, and it was not made to be kept, so it would have disappeared. They became works of art in museums because Europeans said it's art. It's not from Africa. It was not art. It was meant to disappear.
Right. These artifacts would have disappeared in the past,
yes,
but don't anymore. That brings us to another question,
yes,
which is you talked about exhibiting more of these works in Africa.
Yes.
What do you do to help African countries to have proper museums that are with the proper funding so that they can keep things climate controlled and to preserve the works when they go over there? What needs to be done?
They need advice from people who know what is a museum, who know to build them. So we know this and we can help them to do this. And even in the report, they say that there are 500 museums in Africa. Maybe. So maybe there are already museums which can conserve these works of art. But we must help them. There are much money from France to Africa, and it's good for helping Africa. Maybe part of this money.
I was going to say, Didier, because you were on a panel here where you were very critical when there was the opening of the Louvre in Abu Dhabi,
yes,
saying France's cultural diplomacy was misguided. What can the French government do specifically when it comes in this regard? Should they be devoting more energy to Africa to help them?
They can help Africa. I don't see why they could not help Africa when they are renting their collections to Abu Dhabi, because Abu Dhabi has money and Africa has less money. I think we must help Africa. It's not the point. The point is we must not return art which actually doesn't belong to them.
All right, Didier Rickner.
I'm sorry for this, but it's just the law, actually.
All right, Didier Rickner of La Tribune de l'Art. Many thanks for speaking with us on France 24.
European museums hold thousands of African treasures looted during the colonial era, claiming they now belong to Europe. But how did this theft happen? And why should these artifacts be returned to their rightful homes? Picture this. European powers storm into Africa in the 19th century, conquering nations, destroying kingdoms, and looting priceless cultural treasures. Take the infamous 1897 raid on the Kingdom of Benin, where the British stole the famed Benin bronzes. These masterpieces, representing centuries of African history, now sit in European museums, trophies of a violent colonial past. Europe justifies keeping these stolen treasures, arguing they now form part of European history. Some even claim they preserved the art better than Africans could. Let's be real. This is a thinly veiled excuse to justify keeping what was wrongfully taken. It's like someone breaking into your house, stealing your family heirlooms, and then telling you they now own them because they've kept them for so long. Europe defends this theft by claiming that these objects were legally acquired, citing treaties or purchases made during colonial times. But how can a transaction be fair when one side holds all the power and the other is coerced into submission? Most of these artifacts were looted, plundered, or forced out of Africa, not legally purchased. It's patronizing to suggest that African nations can't care for their own treasures. In reality, countries like Nigeria, Ethiopia, and Egypt are building world-class museums to showcase their cultural heritage. These artifacts belong in African institutions, where they can connect modern African people with their history. The call for restitution is about more than just returning objects. It's about justice, acknowledging the harm caused by colonialism and restoring African nations' stolen cultural heritage. These treasures are far more than beautiful art. They represent identity, spirituality, and history. By keeping them, Europe perpetuates the colonial narrative that it is the rightful keeper of the world's history. French President Emmanuel Macron made headlines in 2017, promising to return African artifacts held in French museums. Yet, despite this pledge, only a few items have been returned. France still holds over 90,000 stolen African artifacts. The process is slow, but there's a growing movement across Europe. Germany has returned some Benin bronzes, and other nations are beginning to discuss restitution. The theft of African art is not just a historical crime, it's a modern injustice. Europe must stop hiding behind false claims of ownership and return these treasures to their rightful owners. This is about dignity, history, and justice. So, what do you think? Should all stolen African art be returned to its home countries? Drop your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more eye-opening content.